Alright, take the top
Ready
off.
is a metaphysical concept.
Right, I'm probably gonna clip this
Thank
bit
you,
off.
Amber.
But yeah. Thank you everyone for coming to this speech or whatever this is gonna be. So everyone wave so I can so the people watching can
Hello.
acknowledge your live
Hello.
audience. Thank you.
Yes,
I exist. Imagine me waving.
I'm alive.
All right, let's get started. All right, so this speech is about one person only. You're gonna find out in a minute. Okay, so let me ask you this first. Do you remember the first time that you've met someone close to you?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, this person, they were probably interesting in some way? Fun, a little bit funny?
Mm-hmm.
Charming, even?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or maybe they were
Yes.
just all the things that you didn't want. If so, then we've all been there. Perhaps this person even introduced themselves in such a way that it's the least thing you expected, and it just makes them so much better. I've had a person like that.
Mm-hmm.
Truth be told, I've actually never met this person. He lived about 2,000 years ago. However, he is still the inspiration of my life, based on how he lived. Let's get started. He was born in a feeding box. Yep, pretty humble beginning. He was going to be born in an inn, but there was no room there. It was just really crowded, and it was probably just as well. Who wants to be in a crowded inn? So he lived in this barn for a couple of years before he, his mom, and his dad decided to move to Egypt. Where they stayed there for a while. After a while, when several years passed by, they grew up and they decided to move back to the parents' hometown, a tiny town called Nazareth in the region of Galilee. So, interestingly, his mom was a virgin named Mary, and his dad, stepdad? Adoptive dad. Anyway, his dad is named Joseph, and he was a carpenter. Through his dad, he was able to learn everything he needed to know about carpentry and the trade. Now, in terms of education, keep in mind, they did not have all the technology we had. Everything they had to know had to be learned through word of mouth. So they had no technology, they had no power tools, they had no computers or even AI, which is just as well. All they had was intuition and a really good memory. They had to commit everything to memory. So you think trigonometry's hard? Try everything else, including scripture. So yeah, with his parents' help, he was able to learn everything he needed to know while growing up. How to forage for food, how to read scripture and know it by heart, how to do taxes. Yeah, they were under Roman oppression and Roman occupation, so they probably had to know how to do taxes. Interestingly, he was so interested in scripture that he spent 3 days away from his mom and dad, sitting at a temple, talking and asking questions to the teachers and religious leaders there. Don't think that did not get him in trouble. That definitely got him in trouble. Thankfully, they were forgiving, and he listened to them from then on. Several years later, he finally grew up, and sadly his dad passed away. And he became a very well-versed and likable teacher. A rabbi in this case. Yeah, if we're at this point in the speech, you probably know who I'm talking about now. Yep. Jesus of Nazareth. That's the guy. So yeah, he was a really good teacher, and just being a good teacher is one of the things I love about him. You know the other thing he loved? People. Oh yes, he loved people. Especially children. He loved them so much, he knew they were the future, and he wanted what was best for them. In fact, he loved them so much that he would go so far as to say, anyone who would lead these kids astray, it would be better if they had a millstone tied around their neck and thrown in the ocean. Wow, that escalated fast. A millstone. Those things are heavy. Can you believe that? It would say something. Yeah. I don't think he ever actually did it, but that just proved how much he really cared about these kids. And the kids weren't the only thing he really cared about. He had a big heart for people who had been suffering under things out of their control. Some of these things include Mycobacterium leprosy. Now, for clarification, leprosy was a very highly contagious skin disease. It would rot away your skin and your flesh. It was considered unclean to the Jewish people at the time. If you were unclean or touched with this infection, you were cast out of town and left to die in the wilderness, waiting for the skin disease to rot away your flesh. Imagine the solitude. It's horrible. The first leper, however, that approached Jesus, he begged not to be sent away again. And guess what he did? He touched him. And the disease just went away. Now, yes, the curing was a miracle enough, but that's not the point. The point is what the act was. No one would ever consider touching a leper because they themselves would be unclean for who knows how long. For the rest of their life, even. It's amazing how something as so simple as a touch could be such a big thing and make a huge, huge difference. If you think that's crazy, that you're missing out. He also did other things, including the habit of healing on the Sabbath. Now, it is traditional that on the Sabbath day, no one was supposed to work. Sounds great, right? A day with no work. But what about all the other people who needed help and no one was working? If working on the Sabbath was considered a sin, you would have been stoned to death. Jesus was not going to have that. On one time, in the synagogue, on a Sabbath, he healed a man with a withered arm. On another day, he went to what was called the Pool of Bethesda, which had an angel that would come out, water would shoot out from the pool, and the first person to touch it would be healed of their affliction. That's more of a myth. Anyway, he went there and cured a man of his paralysis who had suffered that for a very long time. Again, this was on the Sabbath, and the Pharisees, or the religious leaders, were not happy about that. They cursed him out for trying to do these things, for working on the Sabbath. However, he called them out for being so obsessed with the tradition that they go far beyond God's law and just setting aside the spirit of the law. He would have been stoned to death if he didn't go away. That's the thing about this guy. He is willing to break tradition for the sake of helping other people. He makes this point further about the Sabbath not being so strict. The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. He brought that point back to the Pharisees. Again, that's not the only thing he would do. This guy would literally stand at the gates of hell to be the last line of rescue for anyone who is going that way or falling into such a deep pit. He is such a lover, but that's not the only thing he is. He's also a fighter. Need proof? When the merchants decided to use the temple courtyard as a market for sacrificial offerings, he lost it. He took his time to make this whip and literally turn the tables. If it wasn't so bad, what makes it worse is that these merchants were they had set exorbitantly high prices for these sacrificial offerings. And then no one could afford them. How could they make these offerings to God during Passover if no one could afford them? It was just horrible. If that wasn't a price hike, I'm glad they aren't in the present. All these things, he would do them for the sake of the people because he really cared about them. If that wasn't enough, then there's also this one moment that defined it all. The crucifixion. Everyone knows the story. God's only beloved Son died for us so that we may live. There's a bit more to it that tells the tale. He knew he was going to die. His time was up. He went to the Garden of Gethsemane to pray, to ask for this cup to be passed from his lips. He prayed 3 times. He was afraid of that cross. That cross was the place of ultimate suffering. He wanted that to be gone, but he knew if he didn't do it, who would? He decided to stay. He would not let his fear stop him from doing God's will. He would not let him be unfaithful. So he was betrayed by his own disciple, handed over by his own people, and persecuted by his own nation. He was mocked, beat, bruised, whipped 39 times, and ultimately nailed to that tree. And yet, even on this tortuous stand, he still looked at them with love. Can you imagine that? Take a second and try to imagine it if you can. Being betrayed by that person closest to you, stabbed in the back, and left to die. It's hard, isn't it? In most cases, you would rather they were dead or not even born. Jesus understood that. He understood that they thought he was a charlatan, a fraud, a false prophet, not the Messiah. But still, he dare not let a single shred of hate or anger enter his gaze. It would betray who he was. And I believe in that firmly. A man's character is not defined by their highest point. It is defined at their lowest. There was no lower he could go than on that cross. And he shone so brilliantly. Many astonishing men and women in our time have heard and told stories of trial and torture, suffering, and they come out with scars as a badge of honor. It takes real courage to go through all of that and still smile at the end of the day. Jesus was no different from us. He lived his life as a man. He suffered, he died, but more importantly, he lived as we ought to. He was affected and He was affected and exposed to all the world and its wicked ways. But here's the thing. He neither bent nor broke to the world and all of its curses. Not one crack, not one fracture, not one chip. Not even death could keep him locked away or broken. That's the kind of person I want to be. Someone who doesn't give up even when it's hard. Who still loves unconditionally. Jesus was a man who lived, died, and rose again, unbroken. Thank you for coming.
Woo!